think we can help. So it's good to see you here. Enjoy the day. And my pleasure now to hand over to Professor Jon Butterworth, who's going to talk to you next. So Jon, over to you.
Oh, good. Thanks very much. I'm going to open this up as well because I can't see the notes. And unusually, I've written some notes here because this is a kind of unusual talk to give. As you've heard, I'm not very typical. So I can't believe it's that low, people who end up being professors. But maybe it depends. Maybe it's slightly different. Was that for all physics?
That's for all physics.
So it might be slightly different for SGFC, but yes. Okay.
Physics and astronomy, actually.
Right. So you might wonder, given that I'm so atypical, why I'm actually here, and I actually did wonder myself, because I've got this hugely varied career, which is doing my degree, both degrees in the same place, very unadventurously. Doing a postdoc for Penn State, which looks kind of adventurous. It said that my PhD, my DPhil, was based on the Zeus experiment in Hamburg, and so was my postdoc at Penn State. So I actually didn't even change office when I moved from Oxford to Penn State. And UCL was also on Zeus in Hamburg, so I got a lectureship at UCL and stayed in the same office pretty much as well, and then I've been there ever since. So it's absolutely, really highlights the versatility of the physics career. And if you aspire to that kind of range of activity, in the end you can end up giving a keynote speech at somewhere like this, and they'll spell your name wrong on the badge, and everyone's got a better shirt than you. So, and better tie as well. So I had to think about this talk a little bit more than maybe as a professor you get used to giving roughly the same talk very often, and that's one of the secrets of the trade, which I'm sure a lot of you have already picked up. So I thought, why me here? And I also, like Paul, was thinking back to when I was at this stage. And I was lucky enough to go on a week-long course on Careers Research Advisory course. At the beginning of that week, I wasn't sure I wanted to stay in academia. At the end of the week, I still wasn't sure. In the end, I made my mind up. But I learned an awful lot on that course. And one of the things that I learned is down to probably one of the people in the background here. This is showing your age as well. That's Margaret Thatcher, in case you don't know. But one of the guys who was who was doing lectures and running workshops at this course was one of her seniors. Well, he was senior-ish, mid-ranking civil servants. He was not the parliamentary private secretary, but he was not a politician. He was a civil servant. He was working in the background at number 10, and he was a lot of fun actually. And had a lot of experience. I mean, I think by then Thatcher had just about left, or she was on the way out actually. No, she'd left by then, so I'm not quite that old. But he'd been in number 10 while Thatcher was in number 10. It was I think John Major was Prime Minister by this time, so that was probably why he had the spare time to do Careers Research Advisory courses, because he'd probably been rushed out of the door with all Thatcher's people. Anyway, he was really dynamic, he was really good, he had a lot of experience. And one of the things they did was they ran mock interviews of you as an academic, as a PhD candidate, as I was at the time, telling someone in some high-powered business or industry or the civil service why they should hire you. And I was getting on with him quite well, so I went into this meeting quite complacent. And he really went for me. He's like, what's the point of what you do? Isn't it utterly stupid to spend money and time? What is wrong with you that you spend time on particle physics? And just really pushed. And I kept sort of apologising for it and saying, no, but wait. Pushed and pushed and pushed. And in the end, I left the meeting thinking, that's terrible, I'm unemployable. Afterwards, debriefing, he said, what are you on about? All the things that you can do as a PhD student and as a postdoc. Why did you not push back? All I was doing was pushing to see when you push back, and you never pushed back. So I think this is what Paul said, the market is on your side, right? You can do an awful lot and you push back. So even my boring career up there, if you actually look at what it involves, when I was doing my PhD, I was also editing a college magazine. My supervisor wasn't very pleased about that, but I was also a terrible rower and a guitarist, but I was also working on the construction of the Zeus detector, which was a hugely complex international project. And I was a student level role, but I was involved. Some of you in the audience will remember this rather well. Graham was a postdoc at the time, who was supervising us. I was working on emulating the parallel processing trigger. Parallel processing was completely new then. It was a transputer network, which is basically like a load of Nokia bricks in a row. I mean, now it's completely out of date, but then this was like 1989, 1990. It was really state of the art, and I was emulating it in Fortran, which was pretty old even then, but never mind. And I was working on Monte Carlo simulations of particle theory, which involved quite a bit of mathematics as well. Then as a postdoc, I was working, first of all, I had experience working in the US system, so even though I was in Hamburg, I was dealing with all the kind of the different way of operating that the NSF in the United States does, and the different kind of university. I was living in Hamburg. I was learning a little bit of German, not enough really, but never mind. And I was, and then I made the first ever measurement of hadronic jets produced in photon-proton collisions, and I was still playing the guitar. Best least said about that, the better, really. And then, this is a stage kind of where you guys will be. And then, as an academic, the idea that academics live in an ivory tower is actually nonsense. If you look at what you do, you work on, as well as lecturing and doing research, you work on advisory committees. I was on CERN Council. You're dealing with the government quite often as you get more senior. I was vice dean research, which is the whole of mathematical and physical sciences, much beyond your speciality. I'm head of department at the moment, which is why I have to brush off after this talk, unfortunately. I was PI of Atlas for a while with the budgets, many millions of pounds budgets that we control. Chair of international collaborations, physics output, and so on and so on. I'm not trying to brag here. I'm just trying to say that this is what we do in academia. We should not get fooled by the idea that we're living in some kind of ivory tower. Now, we have different requirements on our jobs than say someone working in industry does or working in business. We have different time scales. We have different levels of self-control, of control over our day, for instance. So there are differences, but nevertheless, this is not. A lot of people who will be interviewing you they probably know quite well what academics do, but they're looking to see whether you know, and you need to push back. So I'm going to carry on a little bit and flesh out some of those things, just to give an example of what I mean. So one of the qualities we pick up, problem solving is hugely sought after. If you look at people who come out of an undergraduate degree, and we do this at UCL, we look at what employers think is lacking or is good about the students, and also the IOP does surveys like this, and the government does surveys like this. The ability to solve problems when the problem is not something you've seen on a previous exam paper is really sought after and really very hard to instill. It's not really instilled. We try very hard to instill it in undergraduate degrees. It's not very often instilled properly. It's maybe in the 4-year projects and things you get a little bit that way. But in research, it clearly that's really the name of the game. That's what you're doing when you turn into being a researcher. This is a picture of that transputer network. It's a simulation of an online event selection hardware and software for this tracker we were building. And the reason I've shown it up here, that was the bit I was given. My supervisor was a Canadian postdoc called Doug Gingrich, who's now professor in Edmonton. And he really didn't want a student, and he made this really quite well known. He was my supervisor originally was supposed to be the head of the group, was Roger Cashmore, and he was I was dumped. He didn't have time, so I was dumped on this postdoc, and boy did I feel dumped on this postdoc. And he definitely was very grumpy about having this such a student to deal with because he was busy. He had loads of stuff to do. So way down on his priority list was to fix up this Fortran emulation of this second level trigger. It was about number 10, and he was going to get to it in 6 months. So he just gave it me to make me go away, basically. He said, see if you can sort that out. And I'd never programmed in Fortran before. I knew a bit of programming, but no. And it was so refreshing to be given a problem that actually what mattered was getting it solved, not learning, not what it would teach me. You know, it wasn't like no one was going to pat me on the head and give me 10 out of 10 for doing it. It was like, the challenge was, can I do this faster? Can I do this in 6 months before Doug gets to it and does it in 2 minutes? Because he probably could. And it turns out I did. I mean, I basically went through the whole Fortran, sorted it out, made it faster, 10 times shorter and clear and understood. And the guy's face when I took it to him and said, I think this works now, and he looked very sceptical, and then he looked at it and said, oh, maybe it does. And then that was such a feeling of achievement, that this kind of problem solving, that you just get dumped a very ill-defined problem, actually. You work out how to solve it. That is really sought after. It's everywhere. Obviously, we want it in physics as well, but you really want that everywhere. And the kind of person who can do that when they're dropped into a new business, a new situation, whatever it is really important. And you're learning that now. You've probably learned that, a lot of you already. But remember, that is not a cheap skill. That's something that not that many people have when they're looking for jobs. And of course, the projects we work on are really complex. I work on Atlas. Oops, I've just flipped it over there and not here. I work on the Atlas experiment. That's, you know, I remember showing the select committee round when I was Atlas PI in when we were building up to the startup, so 2007-8. The select committee were 4 or 5 MPs. They were quite interested, but this guy, a Tory MP from Yorkshire, I've forgotten his name now, which is probably best, latched on to me, I think because I was the only one with a vaguely northern accent, even though it was the wrong side of the Pennines. And he was telling me all about how we all lived in ivory towers and how in his day no one would get all this money for doing this pointless stuff. And it was really quite challenging chat as we walked through the tunnels in CERN. And he was nice enough, he wasn't rude, you know, but he was really highly sceptical that we academics knew what we were doing at all. And then we walked out of the tunnel on the side of the Atlas cavern, and you see Atlas in front of you being assembled at the time. In fact, by then it was pretty much finished. And his jaw just hit the floor, and he was completely silent while it was explained to him what was going on. And then as we walked back, he said, you know, I work in the oil industry and engineering. He was, to be fair, he was about the only MP in the group that had any technical background at all. And he said he works in engineering, on large engineering projects. He said that thing is like building an oil rig from scratch when you've never built one before, using 150 different universities in 50 different countries. How on earth does it ever work? I said, I don't know, but it's a lot more complicated than an oil rig. So the reason I'd say this is, you know, don't undersell yourselves. You know, we're doing very difficult stuff, and it's not an ivory tower. It's very real. And it's that kind of confidence that comes from that. It's like, if there's an answer, I can find it, and if there isn't, because sometimes there isn't an answer in research, then I'll still get closer than anyone else, and maybe I'll prove that there is no answer and we have to try something else. And I'm going to go back to the Zeus tracking detector again on this one. This is a picture which will probably make Graham have sleepless nights. This is a picture of tracks in what it was a drift chamber with many, many wires, 24,000, something like that, wires in it. And as charged particles would pass through it, they ionize the gas, and then they would drift under an electric field to the wire, and by reading out the pulse, you could see where the track went. And you see that all these little crossings, these little ghost hits, because there's no sign on the drift time, so you don't know which direction the pulse drifted from, so you have to do some pattern recognition to resolve that ambiguity. And in the end, if you do it right, you reconstruct tracks, and those are the green lines through there. Now, this is going to be, we were planning to run some of that reconstruction online in the trigger, and if you get it wrong, then you've thrown the data away, so it's very important that you get it right. And this is why at least half of my PhD was writing an emulation for that, so we could know exactly what went on this transputer network, which you couldn't interrogate. These transputer only had one in and one out, I think, so you had no monitoring of it online, so you had to emulate it offline with the identical data input and hope the output was identical, and then you could debug it using the emulator if you needed to. So that was the plan. So we turned the experiment on first time towards the end of my PhD, and it was garbage. What came out was absolute garbage. We tested this on simulation all the way through, and the pattern recognition was just failing completely all the time. It wasn't even finding the little vectors that you start building a track from. It was just absolute rubbish. And this was a panic because, of course, we couldn't debug it. So we ran my emulation, and I think, well, I've run my emulation for the last 2 years on simulation. It always gives sensible answers. I ran it, my emulation produced garbage as well when I ran it on the real data. I thought, what's going on here? We ran it on simulation, and it was fine again. And it turns out what we'd done was you see the hits, the wires, the hits come in on wires. There's 8 wires in a little cell. And we were feeding the data in the simulation in order of wire numbers. So we'd wire 1, then wire 2, then wire 3. Of course, in the real life, it came in order of drift time. So the nearest drift to the track, the shortest drift time came in first, because it was the shortest time. And so they were coming in what looked like a random order. In fact, it wasn't even random. It was ordered by drift time. So I remember the moment I spotting this in the emulation, putting a search in and reordering them by wire number instead of drift time, putting that in, and everything fell into place. Just fantastic. So that kind of confidence, for a moment I totally panicked, and then the confidence comes back, and you think, well, if I can't solve this, no one else can. And it turns out it's a real problem, but it's also soluble. And that kind of attitude is kind of important. Another thing is not to get lost in the detail, and remember that there's a long-term goal. So I'm getting lost in the detail of my talk now. Now we spent a long time building that detector and writing the emulation. It was sometimes quite hard to keep a view of the long-term goal. Graham, pay attention. So that's Graham Blair there with his best hat on. We did a lot of shifts wiring this thing, and there were periods where the three of us were out there, me and Graham and a guy called Nigel Rucroft, who still works for Price Waterhouse now, PwC now. We're out there doing 24-hour shifts, so 8 hours on, 8 hours asleep, 8 hours drinking with your mates, and only two of you at any given time. We were either having drinks for breakfast or in the middle of the night, depending on your body clock. It was sometimes very hard to keep an idea of what the big picture was in this, and that in the end we were going to measure the structure of the proton and do amazing physics with this experiment. But you do remember that, and you do have to. And I think when you're working in a big company or an organisation or a small medium enterprise, remembering that you're solving a problem in a context which is actually much bigger than your problem, and at some point you have to keep an eye on, is this problem really as important in the bigger context as you thought it was, or should you be spending your time somewhere else, and those kind of questions. There are also important questions when you're sitting in Atlas meetings, which is something I do far too often now, to remember that we're really doing the experiment for a reason. It's very hard to keep that motivation going sometimes, but when we're looking at SCFC science, we have this kind of amazing journey that we're on, that, for instance, the LHC, my experiment now, is part of, where you've got this huge scale. We have an understanding of physics that crosses from 0 on the log scale down to infinity, all the way up maybe to the pint scale, where we have huge gaps in our knowledge, but also huge bits that we really do understand. And for the astronomers of you in the audience, you can pick any point on that line and say that astronomy is relevant there, or you're using that bit of physics to do astronomy. We have this area here where we really have no clue as to what's going on. We thought we might find some clues at the LHC, and we might still, but so far supersymmetry or grand unification or any indication of that hasn't really shown up. So we're really on this journey of exploration there, and it's very hard to remember that when you're sitting in the middle of, and the dragons are in the Atlas meetings actually very often. It's very hard to remember that when you're spending your whole day discussing the tedium of I don't know, where a comma belongs on the paper, or who's done enough shifts this week, and why haven't the Canadians pulled their weight on the grid, or whatever. That's randomly, Canadians are quite good at it actually. It's kind of random. So that's, I think that business of being able to get right down to the nitty gritty and do real stuff, but remembering the context and remembering the goals is also something really important. And I'm not just shooting my mouth off about what I think as an academic is real. I do deal a lot with employers, and we collaborate with them, but also they talk to us about what our students do, and this is stuff that they say as well. That talking to people is obviously important. It can be lots of fun. So is Adam here yet? So Adam's going to be here this afternoon. He's one of my ex-students. Communication is a lot of fun. This is Adam and me on the steps at UCL. Adam works for, the Russians pirated it. It's not on iPlayer anymore. That's why we got a Russian subtitle. But it was the BBC Horizon. This is us at the steps, sitting on the steps in the department at UCL. There was a program they made in the build-up to the Higgs discovery, which is huge fun. It's a huge privilege to have people interested in what you're doing. Now, not everyone's lucky enough to be on Atlas at the point that we're looking for the Higgs, but we're all doing brilliant stuff, and it's a very fair chance that there are people interested in that. And communication of what you're doing is an important part, particularly actually in STFC's culture and the culture of particle physics and astronomy. maybe more so than a lot of academia, there's a real emphasis on this, on the ability to explain to people beyond your field what you're actually doing, and that's something that you need to nurture as well. Not necessarily, don't have to get involved in the media or anything, but being able to summarise what you're doing is good, and it's a lot of fun if you enjoy that sort of thing. As I say, Adam was my PhD student at this time. He's doing one of the workshops. He works for The Economist now, and he'll be doing one of the workshops later. And it's not always fun. This bloke on here, it's called Otto something. This is Otto on Al Jazeera. He was, I think, the only scientist in Europe who thought that the LHC was going to blow up either Geneva or the world or the universe, depending what mood he was in, I think. Create black holes that would sink to the bottom of the Indian Ocean, apparently, and cause earthquakes in the end. I think that's where he went. This was actually quite challenging. As you can see, I was not very happy about it. And I wasn't sitting in front of Lake Geneva, actually, either. I was in some kind of dark room in the underground in an industrial estate outside of Geneva. I got called up on the way out of CERN one time when I was heading back to London. Said Al Jazeera knew me because they have Al Jazeera English. Used to be based on Park Lane. They're in the Shard now, actually. But I'd been and done a few other things with them, so they had my mobile number and they called me and they said, "Can you come do this interview?" Because the guy from CERN's just pulled out. I said, "Yeah, sure." I knew the person on the end of the phone. I said, "Yeah." I should have said, "Why did the guy from CERN pull out?" Why? So I got in there, put this little thing in my ear, and I said, "Thank you for coming in, John. We've got Val Jamieson, who actually was a PhD student on the Zeus experiment for Glasgow, and is now working for New Scientist." So she was on there as the kind of the journalist part of the thing. I thought, that's good. And then we got Otto the Fruit Loop. I can't remember his name, but he was, and I said, and that was the point that I thought I almost left, because obviously this is media balance, right? I mean, this is me representing the whole of rational human thought, and Otto representing Otto. So 50-50, right? So I wasn't very happy about it, and also it was pretty terrifying because it wasn't live. And that might sound a bit weird, but when it's not live, if it's live, then what you say is what they get. But if it's not live and you say 9 sensible things and 1 stupid thing, then the editor, if you don't like you, can cut out the 9 sensible things and make you look an idiot. So I was a bit worried about that. In the end, it was well worth it because first of all, Al Jazeera hits a lot of places as a different catchment area from the BBC or anything, and there were people actually in the developing world who'd been hearing rumours about this and were curious to know more and were a bit nervous. When it was edited, it was very obvious there was only one mad scientist on the programme, and it wasn't me. And I think he jumped the shark when, after having said we were going to destroy the world by accident, he said we were also building a super weapon to destroy it on purpose. I think that was a bit much, even for the most sceptical observer. But the point of showing this is that it's again this kind of resilience, right? I mean, I did some fantastic eye rolling actually, and the editor kind of cut it in at the right point. It was great. There's a magisterial drinking of a glass of water while the guy's talking about the super weapon. But the point of showing it is that obviously the editor knew what he was doing. He was a great guy, but also we have to be resilient as well, and we have to stand up and be counted in those things. And you do that for your science as a PhD student, a postdoc. And in the end, that is a really valuable skill for whatever you go into as well. It's that kind of confidence as well at some level. We don't always get it right, but it's quite a challenging thing to learn in the end, and it's also a skill that is used way beyond. It's another example of this is not really an ivory tower. And the final example on the communication skills, of course, we're working in a completely multinational environment, all of us, with the possible exception of maybe 1 or 2 theorists in the room. You'll be going to far too many meetings full of international groupings of people. Nothing wrong with being international, it's the meetings that are the problem, but it's just a lot of them. These are the member states of CERN as a matter of illustration. In fact, it's out of date now because Romania has joined as well. And these are the institutes that collaborate with CERN. And again, it's out of date because Mongolia should be coloured in as well, as there's more of Africa should be coloured in too. But the point is that, again, we're not, the picture we have, and the kind of semi-apologetic picture we have sometimes that academia isn't the real world, is just rubbish. right? It's a part of the real world. It's got its own specialities sometimes, its own special features, but it's part of the real world as much as any other. Every walk of life has its own special features, and we should not be ashamed that we've got our own, because wherever you go to work, if it's in academia or elsewhere, will have its own special features, and you'll learn them because you can learn stuff. Okay. So to get a little bit more specific on where I know the people that I've worked with have used these things, the destinations people have gone to, just to show that this is not completely, this is not just bravado. So people I've worked with, or my students, or postdocs, apart from the one, I'm sure that it's more than 1% or whatever it was that's become the academics by now as well. There are quite a few that are academics. But people have gone into various forms of software. Data science is the current common usage there, the buzzword, if you like, I guess. But it's over a huge number of fields and businesses where it's some form of software development. It's one of the things we do very well in SCSU Sciences. A lot still going to finance. It was more before 2008, but it seems to be going up again now. I don't know, maybe it'll come down again now, or they'll have to go and work in Paris, but nevertheless, that's still a very common destination, at least for people. Actually, not just because it's UCL. In fact, I know people from various universities around the country that end up working in the city. Information technology, of course, software comes under that as well, but it's also more broad than that. People have gone to work for Cisco and various hardware companies as well as the software that's involved in that. I know quite a few people have gone into teaching, and also teaching is quite permeable now. And I know people who've gone into teaching, come back into university, then gone back into teaching, and this is I think a good thing, and it's something we're trying to introduce at UCL for undergraduates as well. Actually, so we're trying to bring in a qualified teacher status as one of the options in the fourth year course. Paul mentioned, that you're all part of the physics community. My God, the physics community needs good physics teachers in schools. And so if you're doing this is fantastic. I mentioned Val Jamieson in The New Scientist already. There's quite a few people, and Adam, who's now working at The Economist. There's quite a few people gone into publishing, journalism. Another colleague of mine from CERN is now very senior at Nature. We've got that happens fairly often. Those of you who read the Guardian science papers might know that some of us even do that part-time a little bit. So, I have a blog on the Guardian science page. There's plenty of other academia as well. So academia, it's not a matter of just as leaving academia doesn't mean leaving physics, because you do physics all over the place, or astronomy. It's also true that you can leave physics but stay in academia, and there's a guy called Martin Utley, who was a PhD student at the same time as me, who's now head of the Clinical Operational Research Unit at UCL, which is in the Maths department, believe it or not, and deals with optimisation of healthcare for the NHS mainly. They do NHS research contracts. And it's absolutely fascinating, and I know other people who've gone into other academic fields, and he's got a PhD in particle physics, but it had the right analytic skills to start on this, and he's been hugely successful in that area. And there are people working in the NHS, not just in that kind of operational research that Martin's doing, but also in radiography. We've got people, we're collaborating now with, for example, on hadron therapy, with people who've been building calorimetry detectors for neutrinos double beta decay experiments, and now working at Clatterbridge up in Liverpool, and also we'll be working across the road from us where the new hadron therapy centre is going up, and working on actual, with patients, on using physics in a medical physics environment. And some of them, I believe, are doing some secret government stuff that I don't know anything about at all. There are lots of options, is the point. So I think that if you really want to sum up why is a research degree, you pick up a lot of technical skills, and they will vary depending on what you're doing as your project, what the skills are. You pick up a lot of technical skills and a lot of transferable skills. I think if you go to sum up what you really learn as a research student that is valuable, is you're used to dealing with open-ended problems, and here's our open-ended problem. I'm going to finish with a bit of physics. This is the standard model, as many of you will know, all of you probably will know. we're in this kind of strange situation now where we have a complete theory, and the Higgs boson was the last particle predicted by the Standard Model. There it is, mysteriously in the background, giving all the other fundamental particles mass. There's nothing else predicted. So we have a beautiful internally consistent theory which would have fallen apart if the Higgs boson hadn't been there, but it didn't. It passed this amazing test, predicted something qualitatively new in nature. The scalar boson is just, there's nothing else like it. So we're all, of course, very smug, and we know that all our problems are solved, which of course is absolute nonsense, because this is beyond the Standard Model. We don't actually have gravity in there. I don't mean bad gravity, I mean gravity. It's beyond the Standard Model. And you might say, well, okay, then I don't care about that. The Standard Model is just a particle physics thing. Einstein told us how gravity works, and so we've got general relativity and the Standard Model, and as long as I don't go too near a black hole or up to the Planck scale, then it's all fine. Everything works, and of course that's also not true, because the rotation curves of galaxies are not described even by the combination of the best two theories we have in physics. We know that either our understanding of gravity is wrong in a way that we can't work out at all, or more likely that there's a lot more matter around than is possible in the Standard Model. Dark matter there's no good candidate for this dark matter, which is about 80% of the universe, of the mass of the universe. So it's beyond, either general relativity is wrong or the Standard Model is incomplete, and I think, like most people, my money will be on the Standard Model being incomplete. So we're looking for that. We have an open-ended problem. We're looking for ways to address that. The Higgs, if you like, was a very well-posed question, in that you knew if the Standard Model Higgs was going to be there, then it was within reach of the LHC, and you could prove the negative. So if we hadn't found it, we'd know the Standard Model was wrong, our understanding of mass was wrong, electric symmetry breaking was wrong, we didn't have a fundamental model, we'd have been back to square one in a way, and it would have been, in some ways, very, very exciting. I think it's somewhat more exciting to have the Higgs boson there, but it still leaves this open-ended issue that we're looking for clues as to what might be the bigger theory that embeds the Standard Model as a hugely successful, effective theory, but also incorporates certainly dark matter and hopefully gravity, and hopefully the fact that there's a matter-antimatter asymmetry in the universe, and all the other loose ends that intrigue and annoy physicists and astronomers. So that open-ended problems are great. But another thing that's really important, and those of you who've already, how many people are postdocs here? Right, so most of you, you three, I think, know one of the really important skills for sure, which is finishing stuff. We live in a world of open-ended problems, as do people in business and industry. There's always something else to do. There's always another question to be addressed. This is what's going on at the LHC at the moment. You can see the green and the red, the green and the blue data sets are the lower energy data that we discovered the Higgs with. The red is the high energy 13 TeV data that we got last year, and pink is where we are this year. We're still chewing through this data. We're looking for signs of beyond the Standard Model physics. We're refining our measurements of the Standard Model. There's the luminosity up the side in femtobands, obviously. There's a lot of open-ended problems in there. It's clearly not finished, but this is Atlas, a picture of an Atlas collision event, where the two yellow blobs that you see in the circular projection are those two yellow histograms, peaks of energy there. They're isolated photons. It's one of the ways the Higgs boson can decay. You count those events. This is from the 8 TeV running from 2012 running. You count those events and you do a bit of relativistic kinematics and you work out the invariant mass of that pair of photons. And you count them. And we're still counting them. But at some point you say, that's enough. We've learned something, we publish, we announce it, and of course on 4th of July 2012 we did announce it. We carried on taking data actually, as you see, towards the end of 2012. But at some point you set a threshold where you say, after this, I really have learned something beyond this. It's refinements and it's interesting, but actually this is a point, this is a marker in the sand where we've actually learned something new. We finished it, we discovered the Higgs. Now, as I said, that's not finished physics, it's not finished the LHC, there's a lot more to do, but it's important to draw lines, complete things, and then move on. And with that, I'll finish the talk. Thank you. I think we've got time scheduled for questions, is that right? Yeah. So if there are any questions. Yes?
How common is it for someone to do a PhD, say, in physics and astronomy, and then go on to do a postdoc in a completely different things? I don't know, neuroscience.
Yeah, so I don't know if in case you didn't hear, the question was how common is it to do a PhD in physics and astronomy, in particle physics or astronomy, or physics, and go and do a postdoc somewhere else. It's not super common, but it definitely happens. There's a student left UCL 2 years ago who's now working in the medical area. So he's still doing physics at some level, but he's doing it in a completely different department, a different academic discipline. So that kind of, in fact, there's two. So my last student, Sarah Baker, is doing that as well. So there's two of them in the last 3 years that left UCL in the particle physics group. So that's got to be 2 out of 20, 30, 20. So it's not unheard of. I don't know what the actual statistics are, but it's certainly doable. Both of those were in the sort of, they were using their physics, so they didn't go completely off-piste into a completely different area. But they're definitely on a different academic track now, in a different academic discipline, or actually one of them at least will probably end up working for the NHS.
So it's not including all the surveys and stuff like I would do in STFC to find out what they're doing?
Yeah, I don't know. Does anyone have the actual stats for that? I don't know whether we often... the surveys I've seen will talk about postdoc, but they won't actually give the discipline of the postdoc its rank. So
it's not something I've seen either, but I did that. I ended up doing my postdoc in
Atmospheric physics. Thanks, Shanti. I ended up doing my postdoc in atmospheric physics and then most of my research career in atmospheric physics, so I switched track at that point as well. But I don't know if we've ever looked at any stats, but it's a reasonable number. The skills are, as John was saying, because there's such transferable skills, there is opportunities to look much more broadly than just the area you're working in.
I have a friend who was a postdoc, PhD a year above me, who went into the city, said he was going to retire at the age of 40, having made loads of money, did exactly that, which surprised me enormously, and then went and did a postdoc and a PhD, a second PhD and a postdoc in philosophy. I'm not necessarily holding that up as an example, but he's having a laugh. So. Yes?
Yeah, I've got one question, it actually relates to the previous question. So given that you've got a PhD in
So given that you've got a question, or given that you've got a PhD in topic X, say astrophysics, and you then are taking interest in another field, say space science or something similar, which is physics, but it's not exactly the same stuff, and then you look at the job descriptions like, yeah, they want experience of this, how flexible generally are those demands, and how much is it more based on what you bring to the table, which allows you to negotiate that position?
That's a good question, and I think and obviously I don't have a huge amount of personal experience of that since I've stayed in the same field. But from what I've seen happen with other people, I think it will depend enormously on the job, so on the where you're headed and what their opportunities are. So I think very often people are looking for, if they're looking to develop a career, it depends whether they've got a particularly shaped hole that they need someone to fill urgently because they've got a mission that's going to fail if they don't do it, in which case they're really looking for the person who can just drop right in and do the job. But if they're looking for someone in the long term who's going to take a leadership role in their organisation, then you're in a very strong position because then you're bringing, you're worth, it's kind of, there'll be an investment because they'll have to train you in the specifics, but everyone has to do that in general unless you're going to a temp agency and just picking someone like that. So, but it is true that some job adverts you see in fields like space science or whatever, there'll be more in fairly technical fields. There are often two kinds of adverts. There's one where it's like, oh my God, this person just left, but we know there's someone over there, so we'll put an advert out and try and get them. And then you'd probably, if you're an astrophysicist and what they actually want was a space scientist, then you might be in the wrong. Even that might be too far from the leap. On the other hand, if it's like we want to appoint a junior space scientist to develop their career, then you should be fine. And you should go in and say, these are the things I really can do, and these are the things I would need to learn on the job. But I can do it because I can learn stuff.
I guess you look out for a lot of these things these days have essential, desirable criteria, and whilst there is a little bit of flexibility in the essential stuff, they are looking for a reasonably good fit. You can often talk around your skills and how they might, and even if you don't precisely have them, how you've got the core elements which you could grow into those essential skills. And the other thing I would advise you, having sat on, and John's been here many more times than me probably, I've sat on a number of appointment panels and things that we do these days, and we look at applications from you guys and making appointments. It is the things that you do outside of your core areas of research and study that set you aside from the others that are competing for the same posts. And of course I would say this, wouldn't I, but actually professional bodies like Royal Astronomical Society, IOP, offer a lot of opportunity to do things and develop skills and capabilities outside of your core areas of work that make you a bit more employable and may set you aside from the competition. We're just kicking off, so I think it's a really good thing to do, an early career physicists group in the Institute shortly that'll bring you guys together from academia, postdocs, and people who are just starting their career in industry to share experiences and get together and just do interesting stuff around physics. And those kind of opportunities can add a lot to CVs, I would say.
I just add something to that. I mean, from the point of view of someone mostly appointing academic positions, that's my experience at UCL. It's not actually so much the extracurricular. It's not like I was president of the whatever society. It's often more the soft skills that are actually within physics. So, and that's why I was trying to emphasise that you can do a lot of those things. You don't need to have been president of the debating society to convince a panel that you actually can communicate complex ideas and win arguments, because you've been doing it in meetings and you've been doing it so often in the lecture process. There'll be a little teaching demo or something. This is now for a lectureship, an academic post, but it's for other things too. There'll be a little teaching demo, the panel will be talking to you. Often they're not so much testing what your physics knowledge is or anything. So can you listen to a question and engage with the audience and talk appropriately to the level of the audience? You know, this senior professor, but in a related field, can you explain what you do to him or her? It's those kind of things that they're looking for. And those are transferable skills which often at the lower level will be demonstrated by off-CV. No, I've not just got a degree, but I've also been doing these extracurricular things at universities and undergrad. When you're a PhD student and a postdoc, a lot of those are integrated in your job anyway, in your experience. And you need to learn to bring those out. And it's not just you guys, it's when I'm looking at promotion cases for lecturers and things that undersell themselves so often when you've got when you're really doing these things as part of your job as a scientist.
Not to bring the mood down for 11 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, but
You've got it.
yeah, I'm going, yeah. Considering how saturated physics academia or jobs or applications seem to be now, in your experience, what risk is there of doing your PhD, getting a postdoc, but then seeming to do multiple endless postdocs with no academic position just genuinely there available for you?
Yeah. We're in very uncertain times at the moment, so it hasn't been unremittingly bad, and we've been through a period of reasonably sustainable levels of appointment. So not that there's loads of jobs, but that there are jobs coming. I think with the uncertainties around at the moment to do with the political situation in the UK, it's very hard to see how that's going to go. I think universities are very worried about funding in general and Brexit in particular. I think that, you know, but on the other hand, we have a very vibrant university sector that will need to keep self-sustained. So my kind of usual answer to that question, which applies even, no matter what the job market is like, actually, is don't do something in the hope of future reward. If you're not actually doing a postdoc because you love it and you're excited by what you're doing, and the same goes for a PhD actually, then don't do it. And if you are excited, because if you're not excited and you're not loving what you're actually doing, then your chances of getting another job in the same field are quite small anyway. And if you end up saying, well, I've been unlucky, and the way the cycle is, you know, if I'd have been coming up for the job market 5 years ago, I'd have been fine, but at the moment there isn't anything. You have a load of other options. You didn't waste your time because you enjoyed what you were doing, and you've contributed to physics in the way, in the discipline you loved. Now you're going to do something else. But don't say, oh, I hate this job, but if I hang on for another 3 years, I might get the dream lectureship. Just get out, do something else. That is my advice. Lectureships are not that great anyway. So.
Hiya, kind of following on from that. So if you do a PhD and get your first postdoc because you really want to do it and all this stuff, but you're worried about getting subsequent ones. So I've had a lot of discussion about this, whether it's worth getting the first one, if it might look worse going into industry, having a postdoc as to just coming fresh.
I haven't seen any problem with that. I know loads. So the guy who went and decided when he was 40, he did a postdoc for 3 years and then went off and did. I don't think you really this is also comes back to don't do it unless you enjoy it. I don't think you're enhancing your chances by doing a postdoc, but I don't think
you're not damaging it if you can't get a second one.
No,
okay.
I don't believe so. I mean, there might be some companies that take that attitude, but on the statistics I've seen, that's not true.
Okay,
I've seen plenty of people leave after one postdoc and get fantastic jobs. I've seen plenty of people do that after a PhD as well.
Okay, thanks.
So how about the opposite way round? If you went into industry and then wanted to go and do a postdoc, would going into industry harm your chance of getting a postdoc?
Again, I don't think so. I think a lot of universities will bite your hand off if you've been working in a reasonable area. There are certainly doing a job, working outside of academia in between an undergraduate and a PhD. Actually, I would say enhances your chances of doing a good PhD, and because a little bit more experience can really help. It's maybe not quite such a strong idea for the postdoc thing, but if the job you've been doing in industry is relevant, then it will really enhance. And the postdoc is in an area that's ideally engaged with it, then that's really going to help a lot. It's not going to be just neutral. I think otherwise it'd probably be neutral. If it's kind of unrelated, but you decided you want to get back into that field, having had 2 years completely out of that field, then it's probably not going to damage you much, but it won't be as much of a help. But if the field was that you weren't working on data science for Google, and then you want to come back and work on the square kilometre array and do data science there, then it would help, I would think.
We see quite a lot of places where industry and academia have got strong partnerships. We see that exchange going on a lot. So just what you said, people will go and spend a spell maybe in industry, and then through those connections come back into an academic appointment and do a few years as a postdoc, and then maybe go back again. And actually more companies are doing that kind of thing now. We're seeing a bit more of an increase through these stronger connections of that kind of thing going on. And also in quite interesting sectors. So we're going on Friday to PepsiCo to launch a physics in food manufacturing report. So food manufacturing is a bigger sector than aerospace and automotive and pharma all together. It's a huge sector, and lots of physicists are involved in lots of interesting problems, materials, thin films, thermodynamics. So, and there's a lot of exchange between certain universities and key employers, Unilever, Procter & Gamble, Dow Apex. There's strong connections formed in the UK, and lots of physicists going between those, so it's not uncommon.
Hello. I was just wondering how important it is to sort of get teaching experience during your PhD, how helpful that is for subsequent career progression.
That during a PhD, I don't think it directly matters on your CV. So I don't think it's going to particularly help you getting a postdoc to have teaching experience in terms of CV. In terms of being a good physicist, teaching helps. I learned more physics when I became a lecturer and did the particle physics course at UCL. I learned more particle physics there more quickly than I've done any other time in my life. Because teaching something it's the cliche is true that if you really want to know whether you understand something, teach it. so I think, and I did some teaching when I was a PhD student. I don't think it really helped me getting my postdoc at Penn State, but it certainly helped me as a physicist to keep myself fresh and to help my communication skills as well. So I think I would view it as personal development if you're doing it as a PhD student. Once you're looking for a lectureship, then as a postdoc, it definitely helps to have something like that. it may or may not help hugely having it on your CV. Different universities have different criteria on that, but any university that's hiring someone they're going to put in front of students will want to have some confidence that you can do it. And so even if they don't care whether it's on your CV or not, we always give prospective lectureship candidates, we ask them to do a 10-minute teaching demonstration, and it's very revealing sometimes. And if you've had experience that helps with that, that's really going to help. Just if you know how undergraduates think, if you can remember how undergraduates think, then it helps a lot.
I think just time for one more question.
Hi. So I was wondering if you could maybe say a few words on what might perhaps be an elephant in the room. How much do you think salaries and pay grades should actually play a role in determining what career path you should choose as a PhD student, given the disparity in, what's available?
Maybe it is the elephant in the room. But I think it comes back, it's a question every individual has to answer for themselves. I think, and it's also a very different question depending where you are in the country. So actually the salaries, we get paid well above the average salary. It may be below what you would get if you went to work if you just played the job market for the maximum salary, then you can get a much higher salary. On the other hand, it's not a terrible salary unless you want to buy a house in London or Cambridge or Oxford or something, then it's impossible. So I think that's a decision. It's difficult, right? It's a difficult call. The job security issue is also a difficult call. We have very secure jobs once we have a lectureship, but as a postdoc, it's very secure at all, and you may have to move to get the ideal postdoc and things like that, which also doesn't suit some people's lifestyles and ambitions. So I think it's really a call. I don't think we should be complaining too much about salaries being awful, because on an absolute scale, if we've got a job that we love and we have a lot of control over that, then we are still quite privileged, and you can live on those salaries reasonably okay, modulo the house price thing in various bits of the country. But you could certainly earn a lot more elsewhere. That's certainly true. Now that gives you, if you've got the right attitude, or the attitude I had anyway, which I think is the right one, obviously, it gives quite a lot of control over your job. So when I've been pushed around various times in academia, when people tried to make me do things I didn't want, one of my fallbacks is I'm not getting paid enough for the stuff I don't enjoy. So, I don't entirely follow that all the time, otherwise I wouldn't be head of the department. But nevertheless, you have a certain amount of power in your job there as well, because if you're doing your job, if your salary is a way of allowing you to live reasonably comfortably and do a job you like, that's very different from selling your time for the maximum money you can get for it. And this is based on discussions with friends of mine who've gone into jobs like that as well. So I think everyone has to make their own mind up, really.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to thank John and Paul very much for their contributions this morning.